Both of you, to me, this is like an African union because these are the number one most admired telco brand, number one most admired banking brand in the continent in our Cyber Brand Africa that we do every year. You are the standard bearers of excellence, not African excellence, of excellence in Africa because it's global excellence. But how do you keep your teams anchored on the values when navigating multiple markets, multiple governing structures, multiple regulatory approaches? How do you? Who spoke first? Last.
I spoke last.
You spoke last year. Sorry. How do you?
Okay, so
How do you
on
navigate?
this side, you're giving him time to think. Right? That's what I see. What you do. On a serious note, Tebe, you're a marketing person, and you will recall you made reference to standard bearers. If you go back in history in Standard Bank, the coat of arms when this company was in its early days had two antelope on the sides, representing the antelope that you find on the African continent. It had blue skies representing the blue skies that one finds on the African continent. And then it had the standard, the flag, and it made reference to an old Latin notion which was Prodiant Vexilla, which means let the standards go forward. Because in Roman times, when people went into battle or war, they carried standards. That's where the notion of being a standard bearer comes from. Going forward, moving forward. So that's important. Why is that little story important? It's important because it speaks to the DNA of the company.
Yep.
It's an old company with an old set of values that are centered around the notion of trust. The most important value actually in the Standard Bank set of values is trust. And so when we recruit people and when we tell our stories and when we motivate one another, we motivate ourselves on the basis of that set of values. The people who work for us are people who believe in those values and those principles. And then we set then our strategies, which is how do we compete on the basis of those values. There are certain things we will just not do. But then, of course, they tell me that the bank, like the church, is not a museum of saints, it's a school of sinners. So you might have a bunch of values that you think you've got.
I'll be using that from now on.
Now and again, people will do stuff that is unacceptable, whether it be malfeasance, dishonest, etc. But what do you do when that happens? You hold them to those values and you treat them like a cancer. You excise them from your business. So we've got a purpose, we've got a set of values, we've got a strategy that is linked to that purpose, that set of values, and we contract on that basis as well. Most people have got a performance agreement that holds them to actions that support that strategy and that outcome. And for the rest, you just have to hope that that people stick to those values.
Sure. I started on a board of a bank for 15 years, and one of the things I admired about banks, at least in that space, was we had an incident on one teller held R1 back, and we fired him.
Okay, I've got two stories.
I've heard one of them.
We fired him on the spot.
Okay, can I tell you two stories?
Please.
This is a court case, so you can go and read up on it. I can't remember the name of the case, but there was a bank teller who stole $5. It wasn't $1 in our case, it was R5, and they were dismissed. The matter went all the way to court, and the court ruled. And the reason for it is that it's not so much that the matter was de minimis, it was the issue of honesty and trust.
The value you spoke about are quite yes.
And funny enough, it may have been better if they'd stolen R1 million rather than R5, because if you can't trust somebody with R5, what can you trust them with? That's the one story. The second story was we had the DOJ at our door, the Department of Justice and the Serious Fraud Office of the United States at our door for a number of years as a result of our chief executive and a number of staff members in one of our branches in another country having bribed the leadership in a particular country. And we owned it. We stood up, we accepted it, and we went to the authorities and said, here are the facts, this is what has happened, and here's what we're doing about it. Here's how we're excising the cancer and so forth. And why that's important is that issue of say, well, in that 54,000 employees, there are some people who will steal money and there are some people who will commit bribes. But what do you do about it when it happens?
Also, Ralph, I know it's also quite important to you.
Sure.
So how do you navigate that? And perhaps I think what's so interesting is what are those examples which look so small but are fundamental from your experience?
So we're actually a fairly young organization, huh?
Indeed.
If you think about in kind of organizational history, we're young. But what's built MTN to date, and I like to think about the bookends of an organization. So there's a purpose, and actually there's your values. You've got to first of all think about the continent and see in the continent a better and a brighter future.
Mm.
In the way that we kind of reviewed our values, we did a values refresh a couple of years back. So we say, we use can do with integrity, because can do can have a dark side to it. You know, it could be
Just do whatever it
shortcuts.
takes. Yeah, shortcuts.
Yeah, shortcuts.
Yes.
So we
Right.
say, guys, we want to tap into this can-do spirit because it's about innovation. It's about
agility. It's
and
about
all of it.
Mhm.
Absolutely. When you bring those two things together, and then you ask, your teams, are we living towards these values? And I'm using that one as example. And actually, one of the things that we are, starting this year is we're saying the way you perform in terms of meeting your KPIs, etc. For sure, it's important that you meet your KPIs, but the how of it is important. So we're now having this thing called a values-based assessment. So,
as part of your performance evaluation every year
we started it this year.
for everybody.
So people are a little bit nervous about that and saying it will get weaponized. But I think, we'll work through the issues, but the way you deliver the results is important. You don't want to have a scorched earth, kind of society where the numbers delivered
Yes.
is the only thing that matters.
Mm.
You need something that is a balancer there. So, we're going through this, and I'm saying we must walk through these hot coals there, and get to the other side, because we run a multinational business. You can't be in every situation. You can't see everything. So you have to hire people that you believe, to the point that you raise, that you trust, and that they live the values of the company, and that you won't be second guessing them.
So you hired to the values as some says. And I think you had some examples as well of how you've tried to ensure that this happens. Or have you had instances where you say this is an example of how we measure values?
So I'll give a different example, but it plays to the same point, which is, there was a time, I think it was actually in Cote d'Ivoire, 2018, 2019. The team were giving them a really hard time about their performance relative to peers, and they said, well, company X, they're not doing the SIM registration properly, and we think we can make our budget by kind of turning, working in line with how the peers. We said that's not acceptable, and in fact we will adjust your performance contracts to note this particular issue, because we want you to have the right behavior.
Yeah, the right behavior.
Okay, so if somebody is letting people from Burkina Faso through and buy SIM cards without a KYC process, that's unacceptable. And we will say to you, fine, we understand that others are doing it. We'll find a way to talk to party X, but we're not going to do that. And if it's going to impact your performance agreements, we note it. We'll even tell our remuneration committee that we're making these adjustments. So it's a way of deterring people from doing excessive things because they're focused on kind of fun, the performance scorecards.
Just on that point, we say at Standard Bank, do the right business the right way.
Do the right business the right way.
Yeah.